Think about your great-grandparents, or even your grandparents, somewhere between 50 to 100 years ago, and then think about the way they purchased the food they ate at that time. Specifically, beef. At this point in time, color television was still not in existence. The local dairyman delivered milk to your doorstep each morning, and you knew your local farmers and butchers just as well as you knew your close friends. Beef brisket, pan-seared steak, and hamburgers were never controversial meals at the dinner table. Families never wondered what the cattle were eating when being raised just a few miles down the road. They knew the meat they were eating was wholesome, healthy, and tasty. However, times have changed, and so has the way farmers raise and process cattle. Has your dinner become controversial?
College students, like those at Michigan State University, are in a position where they are still young enough to establish habits that they will carry with them for the rest of their lives. Thus, it is important for these habits to be healthy. Unfortunately, the topic that is often ignored or overlooked by this age group is that of the origin of the beef he or she consumes. Consequently, it is of the utmost importance for students to know where their beef comes from, how it is being processed, and its nutritional value when entering their bodies.
More recently, cattle has been raised in 3 different ways. These types of animal production systems include grazing systems, integrated livestock crop farming systems, and industrial production systems. Here, our focus will lie on the 2 extremes, grazing systems and industrial production systems.
Grazing systems in general are formed when cattle depends entirely on food sources from grasslands, pastures, and other green landscapes. The system does not involve the consumption of grain or its derivatives. On the other end of the spectrum, industrial production systems might never see grass. Their diet consists mainly of soy, corn, barley, and other types of grain throughout most of their lives. These cattle are also the subject to injections of antibiotics, veterinarian drugs, and growth hormones, mostly with the purpose of therapy, control, and prevention.
These are the advantages of grazing systems. No unnecessary antibiotics, growth hormones, or any other additives that don't fit naturally. Nutritional value is superior to that of grain-fed in the circumstances that there are typically less calories in grass-fed beef. It contains less fat but more of the healthy fat than grain-fed, has more vital nutrients, and can be bought at a much leaner degree.
Now, here are the disadvantages of grazing. Price at the supermarket level is going to be higher than grain-fed prices at that same level. It takes longer to produce grass-fed beef when waiting for the cattle to reach the appropriate weight for slaughter. Therefore, there is a slower output of production of this kind of beef. Cooking leaner grass-fed beef requires careful practices, and it can easily be burned on the stove. It may require more focus to cook this type than grain-fed beef.
And now for the advantages of industrial production system. One of the advantages of the industrial production system is that higher amounts of beef can be produced at a lower price than that of grass-fed beef. Therefore, more meat can be produced per cow due to growth efficiency.
One of the disadvantages of the industrial production system is that remnants of antibiotics and hormones can be found in beef sold for consumption. Another disadvantage is that the cow is less healthy than the grass-fed cow. There are significant levels of foreign chemicals in their bodies. And third, living conditions of this particular type of cattle are typically inferior to that of the grass-fed cattle.
The majority of today's beef industry consists of industrial production-based beef. This type of beef is commonly injected with multiple antibiotics and growth hormones. The mainstream issue of widespread antibiotic use in agriculture is the acceleration of bacteria resistance. This causes a large-scale threat to both humans and animals alike. If a strand of bacteria becomes entirely resistant to a common antibiotic, it may have the power to devastate the health of an entire population of cattle. Also, it is thought that bacteria resistance in cattle is able to be transmitted through the food chain into humans and cause the same bacteria resistance. This problem arises because the antibiotics used for widespread use in agriculture are dangerously similar to the same antibiotics used for human use. Therefore, once the resistance is built up for the bacteria in the cattle, it is easily transferred to humans where it is also resistant.
Most grass-fed beef is found to be leaner than grain-fed. It shows less marbling, which is the insulation of fat inside the cow surrounding the flesh that is to be consumed. Thus, it is seen to be healthier in this regard. It can be said that this causes less calories to be present for consumption. However, simply choosing grass-fed beef because of its lean quality may be misleading.
Although it may indeed cause for a lower calorie intake, one needs to decide if it is enough to make a good return on investment. This lies in the fact that grass-fed beef is found to be slightly more expensive on the average than that of grain-fed. In addition, one must also take into account the environmental effect of raising grass-fed cattle. This style of farming is one of natural qualities from feeding to fertilizing, all while avoiding the consumption of grain and being injected. But it is also one in which can quickly diminish an ecosystem through the consumption of its landscape over short periods of time. Therefore lies the question, would you rather eat grass-fed or grain-fed beef?